Hey there, story lovers. Buckle up, because I've got a wild tale for you today. It's called HOA. Karen calls 911 on my inflatable Santa. Didn't know the cops were already here for her. Oh yeah, this one's got twists, turns, and a big surprise that'll make you cheer. Before we dive in, let me ask you something. Have you ever dealt with a nosy neighbor who thought they ruled the world? Tell me in the comments below. And if you love stories like this, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out. Ready? Let's go. 1. Opening hook and setup. It was a cold December morning in Maple Grove. That's the name of my neighborhood. It's a quiet place with little houses all lined up in neat rows. Most people here are nice. They wave when they see you, and they don't cause trouble. At least, that's what I thought when I moved in. My name's Jake, and I'm just a regular guy. I like simple things like playing catch with my dog, eating pizza on Fridays, and decorating for the holidays. Christmas is my favorite time of year. I love the lights, the snow, and the happy feeling it brings. That morning, I woke up excited. The sun was just coming up, and the air was chilly. I could see my breath puff out like little clouds. I put on my jacket, grabbed a cup of hot cocoa, and went outside. I had a big plan for the day. I was going to set up my giant inflatable Santa. You know the kind I mean, right? It's one of those huge decorations that blows up with air. It's taller than me, probably about 8 feet high. It has a big red suit, a fluffy white beard, and a happy smile. Best of all, it lights up at night and waves its arm like it's saying hi to everyone who walks by. I'd been saving up for it all year, and I couldn't wait to see it in my front yard. I dragged the box out of my garage. It was heavy, but I didn't mind. I was grinning the whole time. I opened it up, pulled out the Santa, and started plugging it in. The fan inside hummed as it filled with air. Slowly, the Santa started to stand up. First, his boots puffed out. Then his big belly got round. Finally, his head popped up, and he was standing tall. I stepped back and looked at him. He was perfect. The lights inside him glowed bright, and his arm moved back and forth. I felt so proud. I thought, this is going to make everyone smile when they see it. But not everyone was happy. While I was standing there, admiring my Santa, I heard footsteps. Crunch, crunch, crunch. They came fast across the frosty grass. I turned around, and there she was, Karen. She's the president of our HOA. That stands for Homeowners Association. It's a group that makes rules for the neighborhood, like how tall your grass can be or what color your house can be painted. Karen loves those rules. She loves them a little too much, if you ask me. She's the kind of person who walks around like she's the boss of everything. She's got short hair, always wears fancy coats, and carries a little notebook where she writes down anything she doesn't like. That morning, Karen didn't look happy. Her arms were crossed tight over her chest. Her eyes were squinting at my Santa like it had done something mean to her. She stopped a few feet away from me and just stared. I waved and said, "Good morning, Karen." I tried to be friendly. But she didn't wave back. She didn't smile. She just kept looking at my Santa like it was the worst thing she'd ever seen. Before we go further, where are you watching from today? Drop it in the comments, I'd love to know. Karen finally opened her mouth. "What is that?" she asked. Her voice was sharp, like a teacher scolding a kid for talking in class. I looked at my Santa, then back at her. "It's my Christmas decoration," I said. "Isn't it cool?" I thought maybe she'd lighten up. Maybe she'd say, "Oh, that's nice," and walk away. But nope. Karen didn't like it one bit. She shook her head and said, "That thing is ugly. It's too big. It doesn't belong here." I was surprised. Ugly? Too big? I didn't get it. My Santa wasn't hurting anyone. It was just a fun holiday decoration. But Karen didn't see it that way. She had her own ideas about what was right for Maple Grove. She liked everything to be perfect: perfect lawns, perfect houses, perfect decorations. And to her, my Santa wasn't perfect. It was different. It stood out. And Karen hated anything that didn't fit her little rulebook. Here's the thing about Karen, she didn't just dislike my Santa. She didn't like me. I was the new guy in the neighborhood. I'd only moved in a few months ago. Most people were friendly when I got here. They brought me cookies, said hi when I walked my dog, and asked how I was settling in. But not Karen. From the first day, she acted like I didn't belong. She'd watch me from across the street, writing stuff in her notebook. Once, she told me my mailbox was the wrong shade of blue. Another time, she said my dog barked too loud even though he's the quietest pup around. I think she saw me as someone she could boss around. Someone who didn't know the rules yet. Someone she could scare into doing whatever she wanted. But here's what Karen didn't know, I'm not as clueless as she thought. I'd heard stories about her from the other neighbors. They told me how she'd yell at kids for riding their bikes too fast. How she'd measure people's grass with a ruler to make sure it wasn't too tall. How she'd send nasty letters if your trash can stayed out past pickup day. Everyone was a little scared of her. But me? I wasn't scared. I dealt with people like Karen before. And I had a feeling the Santa thing was going to be more fun than she expected. So there I was, standing in my yard, with my big Santa waving behind me. Karen was glaring, her arms still crossed. I could tell she was mad. Really mad. But I just smiled. I wasn't going to let her ruin my day. Not yet, anyway. I had no idea what was coming next, but it was going to be good. Let me tell you more about that morning. The sky was gray, and the air smelled like snow. You know that crisp, clean smell you get in winter? It was everywhere. My hands were cold from setting up the Santa, so I stuck them in my pockets. My Coco was sitting on the porch, probably getting cold too. I didn't care, though. I was too excited about my decoration. I'd been planning this for weeks. I'd even told my buddy Tom about it. Tom lives a few streets over. He's the kind of guy who laughs at everything and always has a good story. When I told him about the Santa, he said, "Jake, that's awesome. You've got to send me a picture when it's up." So that's what I was doing when Karen showed up. I pulled out my phone to snap a quick photo. The Santa looked great. His red suit was bright against the gray sky, and his lights twinkled even in the daytime. I was just about to send the picture to Tom when Karen started talking again. "This isn't over," she said. Her voice was low now, almost like a growl. "You're new here, Jake. You don't know how things work. But you'll learn." Then she turned around and marched back to her house across the street. Her boots crunched on the grass again, and I watched her go. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, looking at my Santa. It was still waving, like it didn't have a care in the world. I smiled to myself. Karen thought she could boss me around. She thought I'd take down my Santa just because she didn't like it. But I wasn't going to do that. I liked my Santa. And I had a feeling this was only the beginning. Let me tell you a little more about Maple Grove. It's a small place. There's one main road that runs through it, with houses on both sides. At the end of the road, there's a little park with swings and a slide. Kids play there after school, and sometimes people walk their dogs. My house is near the middle of the street. It's not big, just one floor with a tiny porch and a garage. I painted it yellow when I moved in because I like bright colors. Karen didn't like that either. She said yellow was too loud for the neighborhood. I ignored her. Across from my house is Karen's place. Her house is bigger than mine. It's white with black shutters, and her yard is always perfect. The grass is short, the bushes are trimmed, and there's not a single weed anywhere. She's got a little sign by her door that says HOA President in fancy letters. She's proud of that sign. You can tell she likes being in charge. But the neighbors? They don't like it so much. They whisper about her when she's not around. They say she's mean. They say she makes up rules just to boss people around. And they say she's got secret stuff she doesn't want anyone to know. I didn't know if those secrets were real or just stories. Not yet, anyway. But I was starting to wonder. Karen was so mad about my Santa. Why? It was just a decoration. It wasn't hurting anyone. It wasn't even that loud. The fan inside it made a little hum, but you could barely hear it from her house. So why did she care so much? I didn't have the answer. But I was going to find out. After Karen left, I finished setting up. I tied the Santa down with some stakes so it wouldn't blow away if the wind got strong. Then I stood back and looked at it again. It was awesome. I took that picture for Tom and sent it to him. He texted back right away, "Dude, that's the best Santa ever. Karen's gonna hate it." I laughed. He was right. She already hated it. But I didn't care. I went inside, grabbed my cocoa, it was cold now, and sat by the window. I could see my Santa from there, waving away. It made me happy. But I kept thinking about Karen. What was her deal? Why was she so mean? I'd only been in Maple Grove a few months, but I'd already seen her yell at people. One time, she got mad at Mrs. Carter down the street because her flowers were too tall. Another time, she told Mr. Lopez his car was parked an inch too close to her driveway. An inch? Who cares about an inch? Karen did, I guess. She cared about everything. And now she cared about my Santa. I started to wonder what she'd do next. Would she just complain some more? Would she write me one of those nasty letters she was famous for? Or would she try something bigger? I didn't know. But I wasn't worried. I had my Santa, and I had a plan. Well, sort of a plan. Okay, maybe not a full plan yet. But I had an idea. I'd read the HOA rules when I moved in. They were in a little booklet that came with the house. It was boring stuff, pages and pages about grass and paint and trash cans. But I remembered something, there was nothing in there about inflatable decorations. Nothing at all. So Karen could complain all she wanted, but she didn't have a rule to back her up. Not this time. I sipped my cold cocoa and watched the Santa wave. The day was still young. The sun was higher now, and a few neighbors walked by. Some of them stopped to look at my Santa. One lady, Mrs. Jenkins, waved at me through the window. She's old and nice, with white hair and a big smile. She gave me a thumbs up. I waved back. At least someone liked my Santa. That made me feel good. But I couldn't stop thinking about Karen. She'd said, "This isn't over." What did that mean? Was she going to keep bugging me? Was she going to try to ruin my Christmas? I didn't know. But I wasn't going to let her win. My Santa was staying up, no matter what she said. I'd worked hard to get it. I'd saved my money. I'd set it up all by myself. It was mine, and it was staying. The rest of the day went by slow. I stayed inside, watching TV and playing with my dog, Buddy. He's a little brown mutt with floppy ears. He likes to chase his tail and sleep on my lap. Every once in a while, I'd look out the window to check on my Santa. It was still there, still waving. No sign of Karen. Maybe she'd given up. Maybe she'd decided it wasn't worth the fight. I hoped so. But deep down, I knew better. Karen wasn't the type to give up. She was the type to make trouble. And trouble was exactly what she had in mind. I didn't know it yet, but the next day was going to be wild. Karen was going to do something big, something she thought would scare me into taking down my Santa. But here's the funny part, she didn't know what was coming. She didn't know I'd already figured her out. Well, sort of. Okay, maybe I hadn't figured her out completely yet. But I was close. And when the truth came out, it was going to be awesome. Let me tell you more about that Santa. I'd wanted one like it for years. Ever since I was a kid, I loved seeing big decorations at Christmas. My mom and dad used to drive me around town to look at lights. We'd pile into the car with blankets and hot chocolate, and we'd go slow down every street. I'd press my face against the window, watching the houses go by. Some had little lights. Some had big ones. But my favorites were the ones with giant decorations like snowmen or reindeer or Santas. I'd point and yell, "Look at that one." My parents would laugh. They said I had the Christmas spirit. Now that I'm grown up, I wanted to bring that spirit to my own house. That's why I got the Santa. It wasn't cheap. I'd saved up for months, putting a little money aside every week. When I finally bought it, I was so excited I could hardly sleep. I kept imagining how it would look in my yard. And now it was here, standing tall and waving. It was everything I'd hoped for. No way was I letting Karen take that away from me. The afternoon got quieter. The sun started to go down, and the sky turned orange and pink. My Santa's lights got brighter as it got darker outside. I went out to check on it one more time. It was still perfect. The fan hummed softly, and the arm waved back and forth. I stood there for a minute, just watching. A few snowflakes started to fall. They were tiny, floating down slow and gentle. It felt like magic. I thought, this is what Christmas is about. Lights, snow, and happiness. But then I saw something. Across the street, Karen's curtains moved. Just a little, but enough to notice. She was watching me. I couldn't see her face, but I knew it was her. Those curtains didn't move on their own. I waved at her house, just to be funny. The curtain snapped shut fast. I laughed. She didn't like that. Good. Let her stew over there. I wasn't scared of her. I went back inside and made some dinner. Nothing fancy, just a peanut butter sandwich and some chips. Buddy sat by my feet, hoping I'd drop something. I gave him a little piece of bread. He wagged his tail like it was the best treat ever. After dinner, I sat by the window again. The snow was coming down harder now. My Santa looked even better with snowflakes all around it. I started to relax. Maybe Karen would leave me alone. Maybe she'd find something else to complain about. Maybe tomorrow would be a normal day. But it wasn't going to be normal. Not even close. The next day, Karen was going to make her move. She was going to call 911, thinking she'd get me in trouble. She didn't know the cops were already onto her. She didn't know her perfect little world was about to fall apart. And me? I was just the guy with the Santa who started it all. I'll tell you more about that soon. But for now, picture this, me in my house, eating my sandwich, with Buddy on my lap. Outside, my Santa's waving in the snow. Across the street, Karen's plotting. She thinks she's so smart. She thinks she's going to win. But she's wrong. Oh, she's so wrong. And when it all comes out, you're going to love it. So what do you think so far? Crazy, right? Stick with me, because it's only going to get better. Have you ever had a neighbor like Karen? Someone who thinks they're in charge of everything? Tell me about it in the comments. I'll be back with the next part soon. See you then. Okay, story lovers, here we go with the next part. Things are about to get exciting. Picture this, it's still that chilly December morning in Maple Grove. My big inflatable Santa is standing tall in my front yard, waving its arm like it's happy to be there. I'm Jake, the new guy in the neighborhood, and I'm feeling pretty good about my decoration. But then, trouble shows up. Her name's Karen, and she's the HOA president. She's mad, really mad about my Santa. Let's dive in. Karen stormed up to me, her boots stomping hard on the frosty grass. She stopped right in front of me, so close I could see her breath puff out in the cold air. Her voice was loud, super loud. It echoed down the whole street, like she wanted everyone to hear. That tacky thing is against HOA rules, she barked. She pointed at my Santa with her finger, shaking it like my decoration was some kind of crime scene. Her eyes were all squinted, and her mouth was a tight, angry line. Take it down, or I'm calling the cops, she yelled. I looked at her, then at my Santa. It was just standing there, waving and smiling. It didn't look tacky to me. It looked awesome. I didn't know why she hated it so much. But I wasn't going to let her scare me. I smiled nice and calm and said, "It's not breaking any rules, Karen. Check the handbook." The handbook is this little book of rules for our neighborhood. I'd read it when I moved in. It's boring, with stuff about grass and trash cans, but I knew there was nothing in there about inflatable Santas. Nothing at all. Oh boy, that made her mad. Really, really mad. Her face turned red, like a tomato you'd see at the grocery store. Her cheeks puffed out, and her eyes got even squintier. She huffed a big, loud huff, like a dragon blowing air. "You'll regret this," she snapped. Then she spun around and marched back to her house across the street. Her boots went crunch, crunch, crunch on the grass again. I watched her go, still smiling. She thought she could boss me around, but I wasn't going to back down. Not today. See, Karen thought I was some pushover. A pushover is someone who's easy to boss around, like a kid who always says okay when you tell them what to do. She figured I'd take my Santa down just because she said so. But she was wrong. I wasn't scared of her. Everyone on the street knew about Karen's tantrums. Oh yeah, she was famous for them. She'd yell at kids for riding their bikes too fast down the road. Slow down, she'd shout, waving her arms like a crazy person. She'd even find people make them pay money if they left their trash cans out an extra hour after pickup day. One time, she told my neighbor Mr. Lopez his trash can was an eyesore because it sat out until noon. Noon. Who cares about that? But that's Karen. She cares about everything. Too much, if you ask me. She's got this little notebook she carries around. It's black with a pen stuck in the side. She writes down stuff she doesn't like, stuff she wants to complain about later. The neighbors talk about it when she's not around. They say, "Watch out for Karen and her notebook." They laugh, but they're also a little scared. Because when Karen gets mad, she doesn't stop. She keeps going until she gets her way. Or at least, that's what she thinks. I'd seen her in action before. A few weeks ago, I was walking my dog, Buddy. He's a little brown pup with floppy ears. He doesn't bark much, but Karen didn't like him anyway. We were just strolling along, minding our own business, when she popped out of nowhere. "That dog better not step on my lawn," she yelled. Her lawn was perfect short grass, no weeds, like something from a picture book. Buddy wasn't even near it. He was sniffing a tree on my side of the street. But Karen didn't care. She glared at us, wrote something in her notebook, and walked off. I just shook my head. She was nuts. So yeah, I knew all about her tantrums. I'd heard the stories. Mrs. Carter, the nice old lady down the street, told me Karen once measured her flowers with a ruler. A ruler? She said they were too tall and against the rules. Mrs. Carter had to cut them shorter just to make Karen happy. And Mr. Jenkins, he's the guy with the loud truck, said Karen fined him $5 because his truck was parked 2 inches over her driveway line. 2 inches. That's like the size of your thumb. Crazy, right? But here's the thing, I wasn't scared of her. Not one bit. I dealt with people like Karen before. Back when I lived in my old town, there was this guy named Mr. Thompson. He was the same way, always complaining, always bossing people around. He'd yell at us kids for playing ball too close to his house. One time, he even took our ball and kept it. But I learned something from him. People like that. They're loud, but they're not as tough as they think. You just have to stand your ground. And that's what I was going to do with Karen. Plus, I'd done my homework. Oh yeah, I was ready. When I moved into Maple Grove, I got that HOA handbook. It's a little white book with tiny writing. I sat down one night with a soda and read the whole thing. It took forever, pages and pages of boring rules. Stuff like no pink houses and grass can't be taller than 4 inches. I almost fell asleep reading it. But I paid attention. And guess what? There was nothing, zero, zilch, nada about inflatable decorations. No rules about Santas or snowmen or anything like that. So when Karen said my Santa was against the rules, I knew she was wrong. She could yell all she wanted, but she didn't have a leg to stand on. And here's the best part, I had a little secret up my sleeve. Well, sort of a secret. Okay, maybe it wasn't a full secret yet. But I'd noticed something weird about Karen. Something the other neighbors whispered about when she wasn't around. They said she was up to no good. Something about money, HOA money, the stuff we all pay to keep the neighborhood nice. I didn't know the whole story yet, but I'd seen a clue. A tiny one. The other day, her garage door was open for a minute. I was walking by with Buddy, and I saw stacks of boxes inside. Big ones, little ones, all piled up. Way too many for just Christmas stuff. What was she doing with all that? I didn't know, but I was curious. And that curiosity was my secret weapon. So when Karen stormed off, huffing and puffing, I wasn't worried. She thought she'd scared me. She thought I'd run inside, unplug my Santa, and take it down. She thought she'd won. But she was so wrong. She was about to step right into my trap. Well, not a real trap like with ropes and nets, but a trap in my head. A plan. A way to turn this around on her. I didn't have it all figured out yet, but I knew one thing, I wasn't taking my Santa down. No way, no how. Let me tell you more about that moment. After Karen left, I stood there in my yard. The air was cold, and my nose was starting to feel numb. My Santa was still waving, its lights glowing bright. I could hear the little fan inside it humming. It was a soft sound, kind of relaxing. The grass under my feet was crunchy with frost. It sparkled a little in the sunlight. I looked across the street at Karen's house. Her curtains were shut tight now, but I knew she was watching. She always watched. I stuck my hands in my pockets and took a deep breath. The air smelled like winter, like snow and pine trees. I love that smell. It makes me think of Christmas morning when I was a kid. Back then, I'd wake up early, run downstairs, and see presents under the tree. My mom would make pancakes, and my dad would put on silly Christmas music. That's why I love the holidays so much. They're happy. They're fun. And my Santa? It was part of that happiness. Karen wasn't going to take it away from me. I started thinking about what she'd said. Take it down, or I'm calling the cops. The cops? Really? Over a Santa? That sounded nuts. I mean, cops have better things to do, right? They catch bad guys. They help people. They don't care about inflatable decorations. At least, I didn't think so. But Karen was serious. I could tell by the way she said it. She wasn't joking. She really thought she could get the police to come and make me take it down. That made me laugh a little. Good luck with that, Karen. But it also made me wonder. What if she did call the cops? What would happen? Would they show up and say, "Hey, Jake, sorry, but your Santa's gotta go"? I didn't think so. I mean, I hadn't done anything wrong. It's my yard. My Santa. My rules, well, as long as I followed the HOA handbook, which I did. So I wasn't too worried. Still, I didn't like the idea of cops showing up. I just wanted to enjoy my day, not deal with drama. I looked at my Santa again. It was so cool. The red suit was bright, and the white beard looked fluffy, even though it was just plastic. The lights inside made it glow, like it was alive. I'd worked hard to set it up. It came in a big box with instructions, those little papers with pictures that show you what to do. I'd spread it out on the grass, plugged in the fan, and watched it grow. It took maybe 20 minutes, but it felt like a big deal. When it was done, I stepped back and said, "Wow." It was my first big decoration for my new house. I wasn't going to let Karen ruin it. I decided to go inside for a bit. My hands were cold, and I wanted to warm up. I walked up my porch steps, there's only 3 of them, and opened the door. Buddy was waiting for me. He wagged his tail and jumped up, like he was saying, "Hey, you're back." I patted his head and said, "Good boy." Then I grabbed my cup of cocoa from earlier. It was cold now, but I drank it anyway. It still tasted good, sweet and chocolatey. I sat by the window and looked out. My Santa was still there, waving away. The street was quiet. No cars, no people. Just me, Buddy, and my decoration. I started thinking about Karen again. Why was she so mad? It's just a Santa. It's not loud. It's not ugly. It's not hurting anyone. So what was her problem? I didn't get it. But I knew one thing, she wasn't going to stop. "That you'll regret this," she said. That was a promise. She was going to do something. I just didn't know what yet. Let me tell you about my house for a minute. It's small, but I like it. It's got 1 floor, with a living room, a kitchen, and a bedroom. The walls are white, but I hung up some pictures to make it fun. There's one of me and Buddy at the park, and another of my old house with my parents. The front yard is tiny, just enough room for my Santa and a little grass. I've got a garage too, but it's mostly full of boxes I haven't unpacked yet. I've only been here a few months, so I'm still settling in. Across the street is Karen's house. It's bigger than mine, 2 floors, with white paint and black shutters. Her yard is perfect, like I said before. No weeds, no mess. She's got a little flagpole with a tiny flag that says HOA. It's like her badge of honor. She loves being in charge. You can tell by the way she walks, head high, shoulders back, like she's the queen of Maple Grove. But the neighbors don't see her that way. To them, she's the lady who makes too many rules. I started thinking about those rules again. The handbook was on my kitchen table. I'd left it there after reading it. I got up, grabbed it, and flipped through the pages. Yep, still nothing about Santas. I checked the part about decoration stuff like no lights after midnight and no signs bigger than 2 feet. My Santa wasn't a sign, and its lights weren't too bright. It was fine. I closed the book and smiled. Karen could yell all she wanted, but she didn't have a rule to back her up. But then I remembered her threat. I'm calling the cops. What if she made up a story? What if she told them something crazy, like my Santa was dangerous or something? I didn't think they'd believe her, but it still bugged me. I didn't want trouble. I just wanted to enjoy Christmas. I looked out the window again. My Santa was still waving. It looked so happy. I decided I wasn't going to worry. Not yet. Karen could do whatever she wanted. I'd deal with it when it happened. The day went on. The sun climbed higher, and the frost on the grass started to melt. A few neighbors walked by. Mrs. Jenkins, the nice old lady with white hair, stopped to look at my Santa. She smiled and waved at me through the window. I waved back. She liked it. That made me feel good. At least someone didn't think it was tacky. I wondered what she thought of Karen. Maybe I'd ask her someday. I stayed inside most of the morning. I played with Buddy, tossing his little ball across the room. He'd run after it, tail wagging, and bring it back. We did that for a while. Then I made a sandwich, peanut butter and jelly, my favorite. I ate it slow, watching my Santa through the window. Everything was calm. Too calm, maybe. I knew Karen was up to something. I could feel it. And I was right. She wasn't done. Not by a long shot. She'd gone back to her house, but she wasn't just sitting there. She was planning. She was madder than I'd ever seen her. And she was going to do something big. Something she thought would make me take my Santa down for good. She didn't know I was ready for her. Well, sort of ready. Okay, maybe I didn't have a full plan yet. But I had that secret, that little clue about her garage and those boxes. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew it was important. Let me tell you more about that clue. It happened a couple days ago. I was walking Buddy down the street, like I do every evening. The sun was going down, and it was getting dark. Karen's house was quiet, but her garage door was open just a crack. I wouldn't have noticed, except Buddy stopped to sniff something. I looked over, and that's when I saw them, boxes. Lots of them. They were stacked up high, almost to the ceiling. Some were open, and I saw stuff inside, lights, maybe, or decorations. I couldn't tell for sure. It was too dark, and I didn't want to get closer. Karen would have flipped if she caught me looking. But it stuck with me. Why so many boxes? Was she moving? No, that didn't make sense. She'd lived here forever. Was it Christmas stuff? Maybe, but it was too much for one house. I started thinking about what the neighbors said about the HOA money. We all pay it every month. It's supposed to go to stuff like fixing the park or planting flowers. But what if Karen was using it for something else? What if those boxes were full of things she bought with our money? I didn't have proof. Not yet. But it was a hunch, a feeling in my gut. And that hunch was my secret. Karen didn't know I'd seen her garage. She didn't know I was curious. She thought I was just some dumb new guy who didn't know the rules. But I was watching her, just like she was watching me. And when she said, "You'll regret this," I knew she was going to try something. She was going to call the cops, just like she promised. She thought it'd scare me. She thought it'd make me give up. But here's the funny part, she didn't know what was coming. She didn't know I wasn't scared. She didn't know about my hunch. And she really didn't know the cops were already onto her. Yep, that's right, onto her. Not me. Her. I didn't know it yet either, but it was true. Something big was brewing, and Karen was about to step right into it. So there I was, sitting in my house with Buddy, eating my sandwich. My Santa was outside, waving in the breeze. Karen was across the street, plotting in her perfect little house. The day was quiet, but it wasn't going to stay that way. Trouble was coming, big trouble. And I was ready. Well, mostly ready. Okay, maybe I was just winging it. But I had my Santa, I had my hunch, and I had a feeling this was going to be a Christmas to remember. What do you think Karen's going to do next? Any guesses? Tell me in the comments. Stick with me, because the next part's going to be wild. See you soon. 3. Rising action and small revelations. Hey, story lovers. Welcome back to my wild tale about me, Jake, my inflatable Santa, and the grumpy HOA president, Karen. Things are heating up now, so get ready. It's the next day, and stuff is about to get crazy. My Santa's still waving, Karen's still mad, and a big surprise is coming. Let's jump in. The next day, I woke up feeling good. The sun was shining, and the air was cold and crisp. I had to go to work, so I got dressed, grabbed my lunch, a peanut butter sandwich and an apple, and headed out. Before I left, I peeked out the window. Guess what? My Santa was still standing tall in the front yard, waving its arm like nothing happened. It made me smile. Karen hadn't touched it? Not yet, anyway. I patted my dog Buddy on the head, locked the door, and drove off to my job. I work at a little store in town. It's not fancy, just a place that sells stuff like tools, paint, and light bulbs. I help people find what they need, and I like it. The day went by fast. I helped a lady pick out a hammer, stacked some boxes, and ate my sandwich in the break room. All day, I kept thinking about my Santa. Would Karen try something while I was gone? I hoped not. But I wasn't too worried. I knew the HOA rules, and my Santa was safe. When work was done, I hopped in my car and drove home. It was late afternoon, and the sky was turning orange. I pulled into my driveway, and the first thing I saw was my Santa. Yep, still there. Its red suit glowed in the fading light, and its arm waved back and forth. I got out of the car and stretched. It felt good to be home. Buddy barked from inside, excited to see me. I was about to go in when I noticed something across the street. There was Karen. She was standing in her yard, holding her phone up to her ear. She was pacing, walking back and forth like she couldn't stand still. Her voice was loud, even from far away. I couldn't hear every word, but she sounded mad. Really mad. She kept glaring at me, her eyes sharp like little darts. Every few steps, she'd stop, look my way, and then start pacing again. I knew right then, she was up to something. Karen wasn't done with me or my Santa. Not by a long shot. I waved at her, just to be funny. She didn't wave back. She turned her head quick, like she didn't want me to see her face. But I saw it anyway, red and grumpy, just like yesterday. I laughed to myself and went inside. Buddy jumped up, wagging his tail. I gave him a pat and said, "Hey, buddy, looks like Karen's still mad." He tilted his head, like he understood. I grabbed a soda from the fridge and sat by the window to watch. I wanted to see what she'd do next. Karen kept pacing. She was talking fast on the phone, waving her free hand around. I couldn't hear much, but I caught a few words, ridiculous and rules and now. She sounded like she was complaining big time. I sipped my soda and watched. My Santa was still waving, happy as ever. I started to wonder who she was talking to. A friend? Another neighbor? The HOA people? I didn't know. But I had a feeling it was about me. Sure enough, about 20 minutes later, I heard a sound. A low rumble, like a car coming down the street. I looked out the window, and there it was, a police car. Yep, a real police car. It was white with blue lights on top, not flashing, just sitting there. It rolled up slow and stopped right in front of my house. My heart beat a little faster. Karen had done it. She'd called the cops, just like she said she would. Karen saw the car too. She hung up her phone fast and ran across the street. She didn't even look both ways, just bolted over, her boots thumping on the pavement. She had a big smirk on her face, like she'd won a prize. I could tell she thought this was it. She thought the cops were here to make me take my Santa down. She thought she'd beat me. Oh, she was so sure of herself. I watched from the window, sipping my soda, trying not to laugh. The car door opened, and a cop stepped out. He was tall, with short brown hair and a blue uniform. He had a little notepad in his hand, like the kind you see in movies. His name tag said Officer Mike. He looked around, then started walking toward my yard. Karen got there first. She practically shouted at him, her voice loud and bossy. "That's him," she yelled, pointing at me through the window. "He's breaking the rules. Arrest him." I couldn't believe it. Arrest me? For a Santa? That was nuts. I put my soda down and stepped outside. Buddy stayed inside, peeking out the door. Officer Mike turned to me as I walked down the porch steps. Karen kept talking, fast and loud. "That thing is tacky. It's against HOA rules. He won't take it down. You need to do something." She pointed at my Santa again, her finger shaking. Mike looked at the Santa. He tilted his head, like he was thinking. Then he looked at me. "This yours?" he asked. His voice was calm, not mad, not loud, just normal. I nodded. "Yep, it's mine," I said. "Put it up yesterday." Mike scratched his head with his pen. He walked a little closer to the Santa and looked it up and down. The lights were glowing, and the arm was still waving. He didn't say anything for a second. Then he shrugged and said, "Looks fine to me." Karen's jaw dropped. I mean, it really dropped like in a cartoon when someone's shocked. Her mouth hung open, and her eyes got big. She couldn't believe it. "What?" she shouted. "Fine? It's not fine. It's ugly. It's too big. It's breaking the rules." Mike turned to her and said, "Ma'am, I don't see a problem here. It's just a decoration." Karen's face went red again, redder than before. She stomped her foot and yelled, "But I called you. You're supposed to make him take it down." I stood there, trying not to smile too big. Mike wasn't buying it. He wasn't here to arrest me or anything. He didn't even care about the Santa. Karen was losing it, and it was hilarious. I could have left it there. I could have said, "Okay, thanks, officer," and gone back inside. But I decided to have a little fun. See, I'd been thinking about something I'd noticed about Karen. And now, with the cop right here, it felt like the perfect time to say it. "Hey, Mike," I said, real casual. I leaned against my porch railing and crossed my arms. "You might want to check something else while you're here." Mike raised an eyebrow. "Oh yeah," he said. "What's that?" Karen froze. She stopped yelling and stared at me. Her face went from red to white like all the color drained out. I didn't look at her. I just kept talking to Mike, nice and easy. "Across the street," I said. "Her garage. Might be worth a peek." What did I mean? "Oh, you'll see. But let me back up a little and tell you how I got here." See, I'd been watching Karen for a while, not in a creepy way, just paying attention. Ever since I moved into Maple Grove, she'd been bossy and mean. She'd yell at me, glare at me, write stuff in her little notebook. At first, I thought she was just grumpy. But then I started hearing things from the neighbors. Little whispers. Stuff like, "Karen's not as perfect as she acts and watch out for her, she's sneaky." Then there was that day with the garage. It was a couple days ago. I was walking Buddy down the street at sunset. The sky was all pink and purple, and the air was cold. Karen's house was quiet, but her garage door was open just a tiny bit. Buddy stopped to sniff a bush, and I looked over. That's when I saw them, boxes. Tons of boxes, stacked up high. Some were open, and I saw stuff inside, lights, maybe, or little decorations. It was hard to tell from far away. I didn't get closer, I didn't want her to catch me looking. But it stuck with me. Why so many boxes? What was she doing? The neighbors had said something else too. Something about HOA money. We all pay it like $10 a month to keep the neighborhood nice. It's supposed to fix the park swings or buy flowers for the street. But what if Karen was using it for something else? What if those boxes were stuff she'd bought with our money? I didn't have proof. It was just a guess. But it was a good guess. And now, with Officer Mike here, I thought, why not mention it? Let's see what happens. Karen didn't like that. Oh no, she didn't like it one bit. "What are you talking about?" she snapped. Her voice was high and shaky now, not bossy anymore, just scared. "My garage? That's none of your business." She turned to Mike and said, "He's lying. He's just trying to cause trouble." But Mike didn't say anything. He just looked at me, then at her, then back at me. "Worth a look," he said, shrugging. He started walking across the street. Karen panicked. She ran after him, waving her arms. "You can't go in there," she yelled. "You need a warrant or something. This is my house." Mike stopped and turned to her. "Ma'am," he said, calm as ever, "I'm just gonna take a quick look. If there's nothing wrong, no problem." But Karen didn't calm down. She kept yelling, following him across the street. I stayed where I was, watching. My Santa waved behind me, like it was cheering me on. Mike got to her garage. The door was shut now. She must have closed it after I saw it open that day. He knocked on it, loud and firm. "Ma'am, can you open this?" he asked. Karen crossed her arms and said, "No. You can't make me." Mike scratched his head again. "Okay," he said. "But if you've got nothing to hide, why not?" Karen didn't answer. She just stood there, breathing fast, her face all white and sweaty. I decided to walk over too. I wanted to see this up close. I crossed the street, hands in my pockets, acting casual. A few neighbors were peeking out their windows now. Mrs. Jenkins was on her porch, watching with big eyes. Mr. Lopez was by his mailbox, pretending to check it but really staring. They knew something was up. I got to Karen's yard and stood a little ways back. Mike looked at me and said, "What did you see in there, Jake?" I shrugged. "Just some boxes," I said. "Lots of them. Looked weird." Karen glared at me. "If looks could hurt, I'd be toast." "You're making this up," she hissed. "You're jealous because I'm in charge." I laughed. "Jealous? Of what?" "Yelling at people all day." She didn't like that. She turned to Mike and said, "He's a liar. Don't listen to him." But Mike wasn't listening to her either. He was thinking. He tapped his notepad with his pen and said, "Boxes, huh? Anything else?" I thought for a second. "Maybe lights," I said. "Or decorations. Couldn't tell for sure." Mike nodded. "Interesting," he said. He turned to Karen. "Ma'am, we've had some calls about missing HOA funds. You know anything about that?" Karen's eyes got huge. "What?" she squeaked. "No. That's ridiculous. I'm the president. I don't steal." But she didn't sound sure. She sounded nervous. Really nervous. Mike wrote something in his notepad. "Okay," he said. "We'll look into it." He looked at me and smiled a little. "Thanks, Jake. Good to know." Then he started walking back to his car. Karen followed him, still talking fast. "This is crazy. You can't do this. I'll call my lawyer." Mike just kept walking. He got in his car, waved at me, and drove off. The street went quiet again. Karen turned to me. She was shaking, mad and scared all at once. "You'll pay for this," she said. Then she stormed into her house and slammed the door. I stood there for a minute, looking at her perfect yard. My Santa was still waving across the street. I smiled. This was getting good. Let me tell you what I was thinking right then. I didn't know for sure if Karen was stealing. Those boxes could have been anything, old junk, holiday stuff, whatever. But it was weird. Too many boxes for one person. And the way she freaked out? That wasn't normal. If she had nothing to hide, why was she so mad? Why wouldn't she let Mike look? It made me think my guess was right. Something fishy was going on. I walked back to my house. Buddy was waiting at the door, wagging his tail. I let him out, and he ran around the yard, sniffing the grass. I sat on the porch steps and watched my Santa. The sun was almost gone now, and the lights inside it glowed brighter. It looked awesome. Karen had tried to ruin it, but she didn't win. Not today. But I knew she wasn't done. She'd said, "You'll pay for this," and I believed her. She was madder than ever. She'd try something else. Maybe call the cops again. Maybe write me a nasty letter. Maybe something worse. I didn't know what, but I wasn't scared. I had my Santa, I had my hunch, and now I had Mike on my side, sort of. He didn't arrest me. He didn't even care about the Santa. He cared about Karen's garage. That was a win for me. The neighbors were still watching. Mrs. Jenkins waved at me from her porch. I waved back. Mr. Lopez walked over and said, "What was that about?" I shrugged. "Karen called the cops on my Santa," I said. "Didn't work out like she planned." He laughed. "She's nuts," he said. "Good for you, Jake." Then he went back to his house. I felt good. The neighbors liked me. They didn't like Karen. That was clear now. I went inside with Buddy and made some dinner mac and cheese from a box. It was warm and gooey, just what I needed. I sat by the window, eating slow, watching my Santa. The street was dark now, and the snow started falling again, little flakes drifting down. It was pretty. I started thinking about what Mike said, missing HOA funds. Had someone else noticed something? Had the cops been watching Karen already? I didn't know, but it was exciting. My little hunch might be bigger than I thought. Karen's house was quiet now. No lights, no movement. She was probably inside, fuming, planning her next move. I didn't care. I'd won this round. My Santa was still up, the cop didn't care, and Karen was in trouble. But I knew it wasn't over. She'd come back. She always did. So what did I mean when I told Mike to check her garage? Oh, you'll see. It's all coming together. The boxes, the money, the cops, it's a puzzle, and I was starting to figure it out. Karen thought she was so smart, calling 911 on me. She didn't know the cops were already onto her. She didn't know I'd turn it around. And she really didn't know what was coming next. Stick with me, friends. The next part's going to be wild. What do you think's in those boxes? Any guesses? Tell me in the comments. See you soon. 4. Climax and big reveal. Hey there, story lovers. Buckle up, because this is the best part yet. We're at the climax, the big moment where everything flips upside down. My name's Jake, and I've been telling you about my giant inflatable Santa and Karen, the mean HOA president who hates it. Things have been wild so far, but now. Oh, now it's going to get really good. The cops are here, Karen's mad, and a huge secret's about to come out. Ready? Let's go. So, picture this, it's late afternoon in Maple Grove. The sun's almost gone, and the sky's all orange and pink. My Santa's still waving in my yard, its lights glowing bright. Across the street, Karen's freaking out because I just told Officer Mike to check her garage. Why? Because I'd seen something weird, something that didn't add up. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's start right where we left off. Mike raised an eyebrow. You know how grown-ups do that when they're curious? One eyebrow goes up, and they look at you like, huh? What's this about? That's what Mike did. He was standing in my yard, his notepad in his hand, looking at me. Karen snapped fast, her voice loud and sharp. What are you talking about? She yelled. He's the problem. She pointed at me, her finger shaking like she was so mad she couldn't hold it still. She thought I was the bad guy, hear me, the guy with the Santa. Can you believe that? But I didn't say anything back. I just grinned. Yep, a big, happy grin, like I knew something she didn't. Because I did know something she didn't. I pointed across the street to her house. It's that big white one with the perfect yard and the little HOA president sign by the door. Check her garage, I said, nice and calm. My voice wasn't loud or mean. It was easy, like I was telling Mike where to find a lost ball. But those 3 words, check her garage, they changed everything. Karen's face went funny. First, it was red from yelling. Then, it turned white like snow or a piece of paper. Her eyes got big, and her mouth opened, but no words came out at first. She looked scared. Really scared. Mike tilted his head and said, her garage? He sounded curious, not mad. I nodded. Yep, I said. Might be something interesting in there. I didn't tell him everything yet. I wanted him to see for himself. See, I'd noticed something odd the other day. It was a couple days ago, when I was walking my dog, Buddy. The sun was going down, and the street was quiet. I was just strolling along, letting Buddy sniff the grass, when I saw it. Karen's garage door was open just a little, but enough for me to peek inside. And what did I see? Stacks of boxes. Tons of them. They were piled up high, almost to the ceiling. Some were big, some were small, and a few were open. I couldn't see everything, but I saw stuff inside, shiny stuff, like lights or decorations maybe. It was weird. Way too many boxes for just holiday decorations. I mean, who needs that much stuff for Christmas? I didn't think much of it at first. I just kept walking with Buddy. But later, it stuck in my head. Why so many boxes? What was she doing with them? Then I remembered something else, rumors I'd heard around the neighborhood. People talk, you know. They whisper when Karen's not around. They'd said stuff like, "Where's the HOA money going?" and "She's up to something sneaky." HOA money is the cash we all pay every month, like $10 to keep the neighborhood nice. It's supposed to fix the park or buy flowers. But what if Karen was using it for something else? I'd done some digging. Not like with a shovel, but with my brain and my phone. One night, I was sitting on my couch with Buddy, eating chips. I got curious. I opened my phone and looked online. I checked some websites where people sell stuff like lights, decorations, even furniture. And guess what? I found something. There was a seller named Maple Queen. They were posting tons of things for sale: Christmas lights, little trees, even a hot tub once. The pictures looked like they were taken in a garage. And the seller was in our town. Could it be Karen? I didn't know for sure, but it made me think. What if she was buying stuff with our HOA money and selling it online to keep the cash? That'd be sneaky and wrong. So when I told Mike to check her garage, I had a hunch. A hunch is like a guess you feel in your gut. I didn't have proof yet, but I had a feeling. And now, with the cop right here, it was time to find out. Mike nodded at me and said, "Okay, let's take a look." He started walking across the street, his boots crunching on the pavement. Karen freaked out. "You can't go in there," she yelled. She ran after him, her arms waving like a wild bird. "That's my house. You need permission." Mike stopped and turned to her. "Ma'am," he said, calm as ever, "I'm just gonna peek. If there's nothing wrong, no big deal." But Karen didn't like that. She crossed her arms tight and said, "No. You can't. It's private." Her voice was high and shaky now, not bossy anymore, just scared. Mike shrugged. "Okay," he said. "But if you've got nothing to hide, why not let me look?" Karen didn't answer. She just stood there, breathing fast, her face all sweaty. I decided to follow. I wanted to see this up close. I walked across the street, hands in my pockets, acting cool. My Santa was still waving behind me, like it was saying, "Go get her, Jake." A few neighbors were watching now. Mrs. Jenkins, the nice old lady with white hair, was on her porch. Mr. Lopez was by his mailbox, peeking over. Even little Timmy from down the street was outside, holding his bike and staring. They knew something big was happening. Mike got to Karen's garage. The door was shut tight now, she'd closed it since that day I saw it open. He knocked on it, loud and strong. Bang, bang, bang. "Ma'am, can you open this?" he asked. Karen shook her head fast. "No," she said. "You can't make me. You need a warrant. A warrant's like a special paper cops need to go in someone's house." Mike scratched his head with his pen. "True," he said. "But I can look around outside. And if I see something funny, I'll get that warrant." Karen's eyes got even bigger. "Outside," she squeaked. Mike nodded and started walking around the side of the garage. There was a little window there, small, but enough to see through. He stood on his tiptoes and peeked inside. Karen ran over, yelling, "Stop! Stop it!" But it was too late. Mike's eyes widened. He stepped back and said, "Whoa." That's all he said at first, just whoa. Then he turned to Karen and said, "Ma'am, we're gonna need to talk." Karen froze. Her arms dropped to her sides, and her mouth opened again. "Talk," she said, her voice tiny. "About what?" Mike pointed at the window. "About that," he said. I couldn't see from where I was standing, so I walked over too. I peeked through the window, and oh boy, was it something. The garage was full of boxes. Stacks and stacks, just like I'd seen before. But now, with the light from outside, I could see more. There were Christmas lights spilling out of one box, red and green ones, all tangled up. Another had little snowman figures. And way in the back, a big box labeled hot tub parts. A hot tub? In her garage? Mike wrote something in his notepad. Looks like a store in there, he said. Karen started talking fast. It's nothing. It's just my stuff. I like decorations. But Mike wasn't buying it. He looked at her and said, "Ma'am, we've been investigating some missing HOA funds. This looks like more than decorations." Karen's face went white, again whiter than snow. "Investigating?" she yelled. "Me? That's crazy." And then guess what? Another cop car pulled up. Yep, another one. It rolled down the street and stopped right by Karen's house. The lights weren't flashing, but it was still a big deal. 2 more cops got out, a lady with a ponytail and a guy with glasses. They walked over to Mike. "Hey, Mike," the lady cop said. "Got your call. This the place?" Mike nodded. "Yep," he said. "Take a look." Karen was shaking now. "What call?" she yelled. "What's going on?" The lady cop, her name tag said Officer Sarah, looked at her. "Ma'am," she said, "we've been checking into some complaints. Missing money from the HOA. Been watching you for weeks." Karen's jaw dropped again. "Weeks?" she squeaked. Sarah nodded. "Yep. And then you called 911 today about a Santa. Funny thing, your call just gave us a reason to come check things out." I couldn't believe it. My 911 call wasn't the one that brought them here. Hers was. She'd called the cops on me, thinking she'd win, but it backfired big time. It was like she'd handed them the key to her own trouble. I started laughing. I couldn't help it. It was too good. Karen glared at me, her eyes like fire. "You," she hissed. "This is your fault." I shook my head, still grinning. "Nope," I said. "You called them, not me." Mike walked over to the other cops and showed them his notepad. They whispered for a minute, looking at the garage window. Then Sarah pulled out her radio and started talking into it. "Yeah, we need backup," she said. "And a warrant. Got something here." Karen heard that and lost it. "A warrant?" she screamed. "You can't do this. I'm the HOA president. I'm in charge." But the cops didn't care. They kept talking on the radio, making plans. More neighbors came out now. Mrs. Jenkins walked over, her slippers crunching on the snow. "What's happening, Jake?" she asked. I smiled. "Karen's in trouble," I said. "Big trouble." Mrs. Jenkins's eyes got wide. "Oh my," she said. Mr. Lopez came over too. "About time," he muttered. Little Timmy rode his bike closer and yelled, "Is she going to jail?" I laughed. "Maybe," I said. Let me tell you what I was thinking right then. I'd had a hunch about Karen, about those boxes and the HOA money. But I didn't know the cops were already onto her. Weeks. They'd been watching her for weeks. That meant my guess was right. She was taking our money. She was buying stuff, lights, snowmen, hot tubs, and selling it online. That's why she had so many boxes. That's why she freaked out when Mike looked. She wasn't just mean, she was a thief. I looked across the street at my Santa. It was still waving, like it was proud of me. I'd started this whole thing just by putting it up. Karen hated it so much she called the cops, and now her secret was out. It was like my Santa was a superhero, helping catch the bad guy. I grinned even bigger. This was awesome. Karen kept yelling at the cops. "This is a mistake. I didn't do anything. You've got no proof." But they weren't listening. Mike walked over to her and said, "Ma'am, calm down. We're gonna check everything out. If you're innocent, you've got nothing to worry about." But Karen didn't look innocent. She looked guilty, like a kid caught with her hand in the cookie jar. The cops started taking pictures of the garage window with their phones. Click, click, click. They were gathering evidence, stuff to show what was inside. Sarah walked over to me and said, "Hey, Jake, thanks for the tip. Helped us out." I nodded. "No problem, I said. Just thought it was weird. She smiled. Good instincts, she said. Then she went back to the others. Karen sat down on her porch steps, her head in her hands. She wasn't yelling anymore. She looked tired, like all the fight was gone. The neighbors were whispering now. She's been stealing, Mrs. Jenkins said. I knew it. Mr. Lopez nodded. She fined me for nothing, probably took that money too. Little Timmy rode by again and shouted, thief! Thief! I laughed. The whole street was buzzing. I went back to my yard and sat on my porch. Buddy came out and jumped on my lap. I patted him and watched the cops. Another car showed up, this one with flashing lights. More cops got out, and they started talking to Mike and Sarah. They had papers with them, probably that warrant Karen was so scared of. They walked up to her door and knocked. Open up, ma'am, one said. Karen didn't move at first. Then she stood up slow, like she didn't want to, and opened the door. The cops went inside. I couldn't see what happened next, but I heard stuff boxes moving, voices talking. They were in there for a while. The neighbors stayed outside, watching. It was like a big show. My Santa kept waving, its lights twinkling in the dark. The snow was falling harder now, making everything look pretty. But Karen's perfect little world? It was falling apart. Let me tell you more about how I felt. I was excited, super excited. I didn't mean to catch a thief when I put up my Santa. I just wanted a fun decoration. But now, I felt like a detective, like those guys on TV who solve mysteries. My hunch was right. The boxes were real. The rumors were true. And the cops? They'd been waiting for a chance like this. Karen's 911 call was the spark that lit the fire. She thought she'd get me in trouble, but she got herself instead. How funny is that? I started thinking about those boxes again. Christmas lights, snowmen, a hot tub, crazy stuff. How long had she been doing this? Months? Years? How much money had she taken? I didn't know, but it had to be a lot. The HOA money was supposed to help us all, not just her. She'd been sneaky, pretending to be the perfect president while stealing behind our backs. But not anymore. The truth was out. The cops came out of her house after a while. They were carrying stuff boxes, bags, even a computer. Evidence, I guess. Karen followed them, her head down. She didn't look at me or the neighbors. She just stood there while they loaded everything into their cars. Mike walked over to me again. Jake, he said, we're taking her in for questioning. Looks like you were onto something. I grinned. Cool, I said. Glad I could help. They put Karen in the back of one car. She didn't fight or yell. She just sat there, looking small and sad. The car drove off, lights flashing. The other cops stayed, talking and writing stuff down. The neighbors started going back inside, still whispering. Good riddance, Mrs. Jenkins said. She's been trouble for years. Mr. Lopez nodded. Hope we get our money back. I stayed on my porch with Buddy. The street got quiet again, just the sound of snow falling and my Santa's fan humming. I looked at it and said, good job, Santa. It waved back, like it agreed. This was the big reveal the moment Karen's secret came out. She'd been caught, and it all started with my decoration. Wild, right? Let me tell you more about that day, because it was so cool. After the cops left with Karen, I went inside and made hot cocoa. I needed something warm, it was freezing out there. I sat by the window, sipping it, watching my Santa. The snow was piling up now, making little piles around its feet. It looked like a winter wonderland. I felt happy, really happy. Not just because Karen was in trouble, but because I'd done something good. I'd helped the neighborhood. I started thinking about the HOA money. What had she bought with it? Those lights in the garage, were they for her house? Or did she sell them? And the hot tub, did she really think she could hide that? It was so big. I laughed to myself. She must have thought she was so smart, sneaking around like that. But she wasn't smart enough. Not this time. The night got darker, and my Santa's lights got brighter. I turned on the TV and watched a Christmas movie, one with singing reindeer and a funny elf. Buddy curled up next to me, snoring soft. I kept thinking about Karen. What would happen to her? Would she go to jail? Would she have to pay us back? I didn't know, but I hoped so. She'd been mean to everyone, yelling, fining, bossing us around. Now she'd face the music. I went to bed late, still smiling. My Santa was outside, waving through the night. The snow kept falling, covering everything in white. It was peaceful. But my brain wouldn't stop. I kept picturing those boxes, the lights, the snowmen, the hot tub. I kept hearing Karen yell, "You can't go in there." I kept seeing Mike's face when he peeked in the window. It was the best day ever. The next morning, I woke up early. The snow was deep now, maybe 6 inches. My Santa was still standing, waving like a champ. I put on my coat and went outside to check on it. The stakes were holding strong, even with all the snow. I brushed some off its hat and smiled. "You're a hero, Santa," I said. It didn't answer, but it didn't need to. It had done its job. I looked across the street. Karen's house was dark. No lights, no movement. She wasn't back yet. The cops must have kept her overnight. Her perfect yard was covered in snow, and her little HOA sign was crooked. It didn't look so perfect anymore. I wondered what the neighbors would say today. They'd be happy, I bet. No more Karen bossing them around. I went back inside and made breakfast pancakes with syrup. Buddy sat by my feet, hoping for a bite. I gave him a little piece, and he wagged his tail. We sat by the window, eating and watching the snow. The street was quiet, but I knew it wouldn't stay that way. People would talk. They'd ask questions. They'd want to know everything. And I'd tell them how my Santa started it all, how Karen's call backfired, how the cops caught her. Let me tell you more about Maple Grove, because it's important. It's a small place, just one street with houses on both sides. There's a park at the end with swings and a slide. Kids play there, and dogs run around. My house is in the middle, a little yellow one with a tiny porch. I like it here. The people are nice, well, most of them. Karen was the only problem. She'd been running the HOA for years, making rules, yelling at everyone. But now, she was gone. At least for now. I started thinking about the HOA. Who'd be in charge now? Would we get new rules? Would we get our money back? I didn't know, but it felt like a fresh start. My Santa had done more than just look cool, it had shaken things up. It was like a big, waving wake-up call for the neighborhood. I was proud of it. The day went on, and neighbors started coming out. Mrs. Jenkins waved at me from her porch. "Good job, Jake," she called. I waved back. Mr. Lopez walked over with his coffee. "Heard they found a hot tub in there," he said. "Can you believe it?" I laughed. "Nope," I said. "But I'm not surprised." He nodded. "She's been sneaky forever. Glad she's caught." Little Timmy rode by on his bike, even in the snow. "Santa beat the bad guy," he yelled. I gave him a thumbs up. "Yep," I said. The whole street was buzzing. People were happy, really happy. Karen had been a bully, and now she was gone. My Santa was the star of the show. I spent the day inside, playing with Buddy and watching the snow. Every time I looked out, my Santa was there, waving away. It was like it knew it had won. Karen's garage secret was out. The cops had her. And me? I was just the guy who put up a decoration and started it all. Pretty cool, huh? So that's the big reveal. Karen's secret came out, and she got caught. She thought she'd get me in trouble, but she tripped over her own feet. Those boxes, that money, the cops, it all crashed down on her. My Santa? It just kept waving, like it didn't have a care in the world. And me? I was grinning ear to ear. What do you think, friends? Crazy, right? Tell me in the comments, what would you do with a sneaky neighbor like Karen? Stick with me, because there's more to come. See you in the next part. 5. Resolution and justice served. Hey, story lovers. We're back, and it's time for the big finish, the part where everything gets wrapped up nice and neat. I'm Jake, and I've been telling you about my wild adventure with my inflatable Santa and Karen, the mean HOA president. We just had the big reveal. Karen got caught with her sneaky secrets, and the cops took her away. Now, Let's see what happens next. It's all about justice, and it feels so good. Ready? Here we go. So, picture this, it's still that crazy afternoon in Maple Grove. The snow's falling, my Santa's waving, and Karen's in big trouble. The cops, Officer Mike, Officer Sarah, and the others are standing by her garage, looking at all those boxes. Karen's face went white like the snow piling up around us. She didn't look mad anymore. She didn't look bossy. She looked scared like a kid who knows they're about to get grounded. The cops started asking her questions. Mike stood there with his notepad, tapping it with his pen. "Ma'am," he said, "where'd all this stuff come from?" He pointed at the garage window, where you could see the stacks of boxes, fancy lights, little snowmen, even that hot tub box way in the back. Karen's voice got all shaky. "It's mine," she said. "I bought it. It's not a big deal." But she didn't sound sure. She sounded like she was making it up. Sarah, the lady cop with the ponytail, stepped closer. "With what money?" she asked. Her voice was calm but firm, like a teacher who knows you didn't do your homework. Karen's eyes got big. "My money," she said fast. "I saved up." But then Mike pointed at the boxes again. "That's a lot of stuff," he said. "More than most people can buy. We've got reports of missing HOA funds money from the neighborhood. You know anything about that?" Karen's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again like a fish out of water. "No," she yelled. "That's crazy. It's a misunderstanding." But the evidence was right there. You couldn't miss it. The garage was stuffed with things, fancy Christmas lights all tangled up, furniture like chairs and tables, and that big hot tub box. Nobody saves up that much for decorations. And the neighbors? They were starting to come out, watching everything. Mrs. Jenkins, the nice old lady with white hair, shuffled over in her slippers. She stood by her porch, her hands on her hips, staring at Karen. Mr. Lopez came out too, holding his coffee mug, his eyes big. Little Timmy rode his bike up the street and stopped, leaning on his handlebars. Even Mrs. Carter, who lives way at the end, peeked out her door. They were whispering to each other, pointing at Karen's house. "What's going on?" Mrs. Jenkins asked Mr. Lopez. He shrugged. "Looks like she's in trouble," he said. Timmy yelled, "Did she steal stuff?" Everyone turned to look at him, then back at Karen. Karen saw them watching. Her face got even whiter, if that's possible. She started talking fast, her hands waving around. "It's a misunderstanding," she cried. "I didn't do anything wrong. You've got it all mixed up." But the cops weren't buying it. Sarah pulled out her phone and showed Karen a picture, maybe one they took through the window. "This look familiar?" she asked. Karen didn't answer. She just stared at the ground, her shoulders all hunched up. Mike turned to me. He was standing by my yard now, close to my Santa. "Good catch, Jake," he said. He gave me a little smile, like a high five without the hand part. "We'll take it from here." I grinned back. "Thanks, Mike," I said. Glad I could help. And I was glad, really glad. I didn't know all this would happen when I put up my Santa, but now. It felt awesome. Like I'd done something big. The cops kept working. They had those papers, the warrant, and they went inside Karen's house again. I couldn't see everything, but I heard stuff, boxes sliding, doors opening, voices talking. They were taking all the evidence, those lights, that furniture, the hot tub box, even her computer. They loaded it into their cars, one by one. Karen just stood there on her porch, watching. She didn't yell anymore. She didn't fight. She looked small, like she'd shrunk down to half her size. The neighbors stayed outside, whispering louder now. Mrs. Jenkins walked over to me. "Jake," she said, "did she really take our money?" I nodded. "Looks like it," I said. "All that stuff in her garage, it's not hers. She used HOA dues." Mrs. Jenkins's mouth dropped open. "Oh my goodness," she said. "That's awful." Mr. Lopez came over too. "She fined me $5 once for my trash can," he said. "Bet she kept that money." I laughed. "Probably," I said. Little Timmy rode his bike in circles. "She's a thief," he shouted. "Santa caught her." I looked at my Santa, still waving in the snow. It did catch her, didn't it? Not on purpose, but still. Karen hated it so much she called the cops, and that's what got her in trouble. It was like my Santa was a trap she walked right into. I patted Buddy, who was sitting next to me on the porch steps. "Good job, Santa," I said quiet. Buddy wagged his tail, like he agreed. The cops finished loading up. They had 3 cars now, all full of Karen's stuff. Mike walked over to her and said, "Ma'am, you're coming with us." Karen shook her head slow. "This is wrong," she mumbled. "I didn't mean to," but she didn't finish. She just followed Mike to the car. They put her in the back seat, and the door shut with a loud click. The lights flashed red and blue and the car drove off. The other cops stayed a little longer, writing stuff down, but then they left too. The street went quiet. I sat there with Buddy, watching the snow fall. My Santa's lights glowed bright, cutting through the dark. The neighbors started going back inside. Mrs. Jenkins waved at me. "Good night, Jake," she said. "You're a hero." I waved back. "Thanks, Mrs. Jenkins," I said. Mr. Lopez gave me a thumbs up. "Nice work," he said. Even Timmy yelled, "Santa rules," before he pedaled home. I smiled. It felt good, really good. Let's fast forward a little. By the end of the week, Karen was gone. Yep, gone. Not just from her house for a night, but for good. The cops kept her after that day. They asked her lots of questions, hours and hours of talking. Turns out, she'd been stealing HOA money for a long time. Months, maybe even years. She'd take our $10 every month and use it to buy stuff, fancy lights, furniture, that hot tub, all kinds of things. Then she'd sell it online and keep the cash. Sneaky, huh? The neighbors had a big meeting without her. It was on Friday night, in Mrs. Jenkins's living room. I went too. Everyone sat around her big table, drinking tea and eating cookies she made. They talked about Karen. "She's fired," Mr. Lopez said. "No more HOA president for her." Everyone clapped. Mrs. Carter said, "Good riddance. She was mean to my flowers." Timmy's mom was there too. She yelled at Timmy for his bike, she said. "Glad she's out." They picked a new president, Mrs. Jenkins. "She's nice, not bossy like Karen." Everyone liked that. The cops told us more later. Karen was facing charges. That's when they take you to court to see if you broke the law. Stealing money is a big deal, and she'd stolen a lot. They found records on her computer, lists of stuff she bought and sold. It added up to hundreds of dollars, maybe thousands. We didn't know if she'd go to jail yet, but she wasn't coming back to Maple Grove anytime soon. Her house stayed dark, no lights, no Karen. Someone said she might sell it and move away. Good, I thought. We didn't need her here. My Santa? It stayed up, still standing tall. The snow got deeper, but it didn't fall over. I made sure the stakes were strong, and I brushed the snow off its hat every day. It kept waving at everyone who drove by. People started smiling when they saw it. Mrs. Jenkins called it the Santa of Justice. She said it loud at the meeting, and everyone laughed. "That Santa saved us," she said. Mr. Lopez nodded. "It's a hero." Even Timmy started saying it. "Santa of Justice. Santa of Justice," he'd yell, riding his bike past my house. I didn't set out to be a hero. Nope, not at all. When I bought that Santa, I just wanted a fun decoration. I saved up my money, $10 here, $5 there, until I could get it. I put it up to make my yard look cool for Christmas. That's it. But then Karen got mad. She called the cops. And that's when everything flipped. Her secret came out, and justice got served like a big plate of fairness for everyone. It felt good to see her get what she deserved. Let me tell you more about that week, because it was wild. After the cops took Karen away, the neighborhood changed. People weren't scared anymore. They didn't whisper about her notebook or her rules. They talked loud out in the open. The next day, Thursday, I went outside to check my Santa. The snow was deep, almost up to my knees. I waded through it, my boots crunching. My Santa looked awesome, its red suit bright against all that white. I brushed some snow off its beard and smiled. "You did it," I said. Mrs. Jenkins came out then. She had a broom, sweeping snow off her porch. "Morning, Jake," she called. "How's our hero Santa?" I laughed. "Still waving?" I said. She nodded. "Good. We owe it a lot." She swept some more, then stopped. "You know," she said, "Karen fined me once for my mailbox. Said it was too rusty. $5. Bet she kept that." I shook my head. "She fined everyone," I said. "Not anymore." Mrs. Jenkins smiled big. "Nope. Not anymore." Mr. Lopez walked by with his dog, a big fluffy one named Max. "Hey, Jake," he said. "Heard they found a hot tub in her garage." "A hot tub? Can you believe it?" I grinned. "Yep," I said. "Crazy, right?" He laughed. "She was nuts. Good thing your Santa got her." Max barked, like he agreed. We all laughed, then me, Mr. Lopez, even Mrs. Jenkins from her porch. It was a happy day. Friday came, and that's when we had the meeting. Mrs. Jenkins's house smelled like cookies, chocolate chip, my favorite. She passed them around, and we all ate while we talked. "Karen's out," Mrs. Jenkins said. "We need a new president." Mr. Lopez pointed at her. "You should do it," he said. "You're nice." Everyone nodded. "Yeah." Timmy's mom said. "No more yelling." Mrs. Carter clapped. "Perfect." So Mrs. Jenkins was the new HOA president. She smiled big. "I'll do my best," she said. "No fines for flowers." We all cheered. After the meeting, I went home. It was dark, and my Santa's lights were super bright. I sat on my porch with Buddy, watching it wave. The snow was still falling soft and quiet. I thought about Karen. Where was she now? At the police station? With a lawyer? I didn't know. But I knew she wasn't here, bossing us around. That was the best part. Justice was served, like when the good guys win in a movie. She'd been mean, she'd stolen, and now she was paying for it. Saturday was fun too. I woke up early and made pancakes, big fluffy ones with lots of syrup. Buddy sat by my feet, waiting for scraps. I gave him a little piece, and he gobbled it up. We went outside after, and I shoveled my walkway. The snow was heavy, but I didn't mind. My Santa looked great, even with snow piled around it. I brushed it off again, its hat, its beard, its boots. "Stay strong, Santa," I said. It waved back, like it was saying, "I got this." Timmy rode by on his bike. "Santa of Justice," he yelled. I waved. "Hey, Timmy," I called. "You like it?" He nodded fast. "It's the best," he said. "It beat Karen." I laughed. "Yep, it sure did." He rode off, singing, "Santa of Justice, Santa of Justice." Kids are funny, right? But he was right. My Santa did beat her, not with fists, but with truth. Mrs. Jenkins came over later. She brought me a plate of cookies, extras from the meeting. "For you," she said. "Our hero deserves a treat." I took them and smiled. "Thanks," I said. But it was really the Santa. She patted my arm. "You and that Santa," she said. "A perfect team." She went back home, and I ate a cookie. It was warm and gooey, perfect. The rest of the weekend was quiet. I stayed inside, watching Christmas movies with Buddy. My Santa stayed outside, waving at everyone. People drove by slow, looking at it. Some honked their horns, beep beep, and waved. I waved back from my window. They liked it. They liked me. And they didn't like Karen. That was clear now. By Sunday, the word was out. Everyone knew Karen was gone. The cops had told Mrs. Jenkins more. She called me to say so. "Jake," she said, "they found receipts on her computer. She bought all that stuff with our money, hundreds of dollars. She's in big trouble now." I whistled. "Wow," I said. "That's a lot." Mrs. Jenkins laughed. "Sure is. Thanks to you and that Santa, she's done." I hung up and looked out at my Santa. It was still there, still waving. The snow was deep now, almost a foot. But it didn't fall over. It was tough like me, I guess. I didn't set out to be a hero. I just wanted a fun Christmas. But when Karen came after my Santa, I fought back. Not with yelling or fists, but with smarts. I'd seen those boxes. I'd heard the rumors. And when the cops came, I pointed them her way. Now she was gone, and justice was here. Let me tell you more about Maple Grove, because it's my home. It's a little street with houses all in a row. Mine's yellow, small but cozy. Karen's is across the street, big and white, but dark now. The park's at the end, with swings and a slide. Kids play there, and dogs run around. It's a nice place, nicer without Karen. She'd been the boss for too long, making rules, yelling at us. But not anymore. We were free. Monday came, and I went back to work. I told my buddy Tom about it. He works at the store with me. Dude, he said, your Santa caught a thief. I nodded. Yep, I said. Karen's gone. He laughed so hard he almost dropped a box of nails. That's wild, he said. Best Santa ever. I grinned. Sure is. When I got home, my Santa was still waving. The neighbors had started decorating 2 lights on their houses, wreaths on their doors. Christmas was coming, and it felt right now. No Karen to ruin it. No fines, no yelling. Just happy stuff. I sat by my window with Buddy, watching the street light up. My Santa was the star, everyone said so. The days went on, and Karen didn't come back. Her house stayed empty. The cops kept working on her case. Mrs. Jenkins told us updates. She might go to jail, she said one day. Or pay a big fine. I hoped she'd pay us back all that money she took. We could fix the park swings or plant new flowers. Something good for everyone. My Santa stayed up all December. I plugged it in every night, and it waved at the world. People started taking pictures with it. Timmy and his friends, Mrs. Jenkins, even Mr. Lopez with Max. Santa of Justice, they'd say, laughing. It was famous now. I didn't mind. It made me happy. Christmas Eve came, and I sat outside with Buddy. The snow was thick, and the air was cold. My Santa glowed bright, its arm moving back and forth. I sipped hot cocoa and thought about everything. Karen was gone. Justice was served. The neighborhood was better. And it all started with my Santa. I didn't plan it, but it happened. And it felt so good. So that's it, friends, the resolution. Karen got what she deserved, and my Santa stood tall. The neighbors were happy, the cops did their job, and I got to enjoy Christmas. What a story, right? Tell me in the comments, what would you do if your decoration caught a thief? Stick with me for the last part, it's coming soon. See you then. Hey there, story lovers. We've made it to the end, yay. I'm Jake, and I've been telling you all about my crazy adventure with my inflatable Santa and Karen, the mean HOA president. We've had twists, turns, cops, and a big win. Now, it's time to wrap it up with some thought stuff to make you think and feel good. I'm going to keep it super easy, just like always, so even a 4th or 6th grader can get it. Ready? Let's go. So, here's the thing, sometimes the loudest people think they're untouchable. You know what I mean, right? People like Karen. She was loud, bossy, and always yelling. She walked around Maple Grove like she owned everything. Her voice was big, her rules were strict, and she thought no one could stop her. She'd shout at kids, fine people for tiny things, and glare at my Santa like it was the worst thing ever. She thought she was the queen, untouchable, unbeatable, the boss of us all. But guess what? She wasn't. Not even close. The loud ones. They can be wrong. They can mess up. And Karen did big time. She thought she could scare me into taking down my Santa. She thought calling the cops would make her win. She thought her sneaky secrets, those boxes of stolen stuff, would stay hidden. But they didn't. She learned the hard way that loud doesn't mean strong. Loud doesn't mean right. Loud just means loud. And then there's the quiet ones like me. I'm not loud. I don't yell. I don't boss people around. I'm just Jake, a regular guy who likes Christmas and my dog, Buddy. I put up my Santa because it made me happy, not to fight anyone. But when Karen came at me, I didn't back down. I stayed quiet at first, just watching, waiting, thinking. I saw those boxes in her garage. I heard the neighbors whisper about missing money. I didn't make a big fuss. I didn't shout back. I just kept my eyes open and my brain on. The quiet ones. We're watching. We see stuff like how Karen acted, how she treated people. We're waiting like I did, letting her make her move first. And when it counts, we're ready to stand up. I stood up when I told Officer Mike to check her garage. I didn't yell it. I didn't scream. I just said it calm and clear. And that was enough. It turned everything around. Karen thought she'd win because she was loud, but I won because I was quiet and smart. Karen learned that the hard way. Oh yeah, she did. She thought she could push me around, new guy, easy target. She thought her loud voice and her HOA rules would scare me. She thought stealing our money and hiding stuff in her garage was safe because no one would dare call her out. But I did. Not with noise, not with fights, but with a little point across the street. Check her garage, I said. And boom, her whole sneaky plan fell apart. The cops came, the boxes got found, and justice showed up. She learned loud doesn't beat quiet when quiet's got truth on its side. What about you? That's what I want to know. Ever had a moment where you turned the tables on someone like Karen? Maybe it wasn't a big HOA fight. Maybe it was smaller, like at school or home. Did someone loud try to boss you around? Did they think they'd win because they talked a lot or acted big? And did you, quiet and smart, find a way to flip it? Maybe you told a teacher, or you found proof, or you just stood up when it mattered. I bet you've got a story. Tell me below, I'd love to hear it. Really? Drop it in the comments so we can all cheer for you. Let me tell you more about why this matters, because it's cool to think about. Life's full of loud people, people who think they're the best because they make noise. They talk loud, act big, and push others down. Like Karen, they think that's power. But real power? It's not about noise. It's about doing what's right. It's about watching, waiting, and standing up when it's time. I didn't yell at Karen. I didn't fight her with fists. I just used my head and my Santa, and that was stronger than all her shouting. Think about my Santa for a minute. It's quiet too, isn't it? It doesn't talk. It doesn't yell. It just waves back and forth all day and night. It stood there in my yard, doing its thing, while Karen freaked out. She hated it because it was different, big, bright, not in her rule book. But that quiet Santa? It changed everything. It made her so mad she called the cops, and that's what got her caught. A quiet decoration beat a loud bully. How awesome is that? I want you to remember that. When someone loud tries to push you around, you don't have to be loud back. You can be quiet like me, like my Santa. Watch them. Wait for the right moment. Then stand up with what you know, what's true. That's what I did. I saw those boxes. I heard the rumors. I waited until Mike was there, then I said it, check her garage. Quiet, simple, strong. And it worked. Let's talk about Karen one more time, because she's a big lesson. She was loud every day. She yelled at me about my Santa. She yelled at Mrs. Jenkins about her mailbox. She yelled at Mr. Lopez about his trash can. She yelled at Timmy about his bike. She thought that made her untouchable, like no one could stop her. But all that yelling? It didn't hide her secrets. It didn't make her right. It just made noise. And when the truth came out, those boxes, that stolen money, her loud voice couldn't save her. She learned she wasn't untouchable. Not even a little. Now think about Maple Grove, my neighborhood. It's quiet again. No more Karen stomping around, no more nasty letters, no more silly fines. The snow falls soft, the houses light up for Christmas, and my Santa waves at everyone. The loud ones gone, and the quiet ones like me, Mrs. Jenkins, Mr. Lopez, we're still here. We stood up, and we won. That's inspiring, right? It makes you feel like you can do it too. I didn't start this to be a hero. Nope. I just wanted a fun Santa in my yard. I saved my money, $10 here, $5 there, until I could buy it. I set it up, plugged it in, and watched it wave. That's all I wanted, some Christmas cheer. But then Karen came, loud and mean, and I had to decide. Back down or stand up? I picked stand up, not with noise, but with smarts. And look what happened. She's gone, justice came, and my Santa's a star. Sometimes, the smallest, quietest things like a waving Santa can make the biggest difference. What about you again? Let's dig into that. Have you ever had a loud person in your life? Maybe a kid at school who brags a lot? Or a grown-up who thinks they're always right? Did they make you feel small? I bet you watched them, didn't you? I bet you waited. And maybe just maybe you found a way to turn it around. Like when you told the teacher they took your pencil. Or when you showed your mom they broke your toy. Quiet doesn't mean weak. Quiet means ready. Tell me your story, I'm waiting to hear it. Let me tell you more about my Santa, because it's the real hero here. It's big, 8 feet tall, with a red suit and a white beard. It lights up at night, all glowy and happy. Its arm waves slow back and forth like it's saying hi to everyone. I put it up because I love Christmas. When I was little, my mom and dad drove me around to see lights. I'd point at the big decorations and yell, "Cool." Now, I've got my own big decoration, and it's cooler than I ever dreamed. It didn't just light up my yard, it lit up the truth. Karen hated that Santa. She called it tacky. She said it broke rules. She thought she could yell it away. But it stayed quiet, strong, waving. And when she called the cops, it didn't back down. It just kept doing its thing while her secrets fell apart. That's power, not loud power, but quiet power. You can have that too. You don't need to shout. Just be you, watch, wait, stand up. That's enough. Let's think about the neighbors too. Mrs. Jenkins, she's quiet, sweet, with her cookies and her slippers. She didn't yell at Karen, but she watched. Mr. Lopez, he's quiet too, with his coffee and his dog, Max. He didn't fight her, but he knew she was sneaky. Little Timmy, he's loud sometimes, but he's just a kid. He watched her too, riding his bike. We were all quiet in our way, but we stood together. When Karen's loud world crashed, we were still here, stronger than ever. So here's what I want you to take away: don't be scared of the loud ones. They might seem big, like they can't lose, but they can. Karen did. She lost everything: her job, her secrets, her power. And the quiet ones, like me, like you, we won. We didn't need to scream. We just needed to see, to wait, to act. You can do that too. Next time someone loud tries to push you, remember my Santa. It didn't yell. It waved. And it won. Let me tell you how I feel now, because it's big. I'm happy, super happy. Christmas is here, and my Santa's still waving. The snow's deep, the lights are bright, and Maple Grove feels good. Karen's gone, and justice came. I didn't plan it, but I'm glad it happened. It makes me think anyone can stand up, me, you, anyone. Quiet doesn't mean small. Quiet means strong when it's time. Picture this: it's Christmas Eve. I'm sitting on my porch with Buddy. The snow's falling, soft little flakes. My Santa's glowing, waving at the dark. I've got hot cocoa in my hands, warm and sweet. The street's quiet, but it's a good quiet. No yelling, no trouble. Just peace. That's what standing up got me: peace and a happy Christmas. I didn't need to be loud. I just needed to be me. What about you? One more time. I keep asking because I care. Ever turn the tables on a loud bully? Maybe you didn't catch a thief, but I bet you've got something. Did you win quiet like I did? Did you surprise someone who thought they'd beat you? Tell me below, I'm reading every word. Your story's awesome, I know it. Thanks for sticking with me, friends. This was a wild ride, wasn't it? From my Santa to Karen's fall, we went through it all. If you enjoyed this, give it a thumbs up, push that button. And subscribe for more, click it so you don't miss my next story. I've got lots to tell, and I want you here for it. See you in the next one. Let me stretch this out more, because I've got room. Think about school, your school. There's always a loud kid, right? The one who talks over everyone, who brags about their toys or their grades. They think they're the boss. But you're watching. You see when they cheat on a test. You wait until the teacher's near, then you say it quiet, he's copying. Boom, they're caught, and you're the hero. Quiet wins. That's you, isn't it? Tell me about it. Or home, your house. Maybe a big brother or sister's loud, always taking your stuff. They think they're untouchable because they're older. But you wait. You hide your favorite toy. You tell your mom when they're not looking. They get in trouble, and you get your toy back. Quiet, smart, strong. That's power. Got a story like that? Share it. Let's go back to my Santa one more time. It's still there. Christmas is close now. Every night, I plug it in. The lights glow red, white, yellow. The arm waves slow and steady. The snow piles up, but it doesn't fall. It's tough like us. Karen's loud voice couldn't stop it. Her rules couldn't move it. It stayed, and it won. That's what I want you to be, tough like my Santa. Quiet, but unbeatable. Think about your life again. Loud people come and go. They shout, they push, they act big. But you're the quiet one who sees. You're the one who waits. You're the one who stands up when it's right. Like me with Karen. Like my Santa with her secrets. You've got that in you, I know it. Tell me how you've done it. I'm waiting. So that's the end, my big lesson. Loud doesn't win. Quiet does when it's smart and true. Karen's gone, my Santa's here, and justice feels great. You can do that too. Watch, wait, stand up. You're stronger than the loud ones think. Believe it because I do. Thanks again, friends. Thumbs up, subscribe, tell me your stories. I'll see you soon with more. Bye for now.